Pleased to be here, but as we were preparing, my fellow panelists and I, we realized that here at a place like DLD, we are in the future echo chamber. We are in the echo chamber about the future. Unless you accidentally wandered in and you weren't actually supposed to be here, you are one of those few people in the world that really thinks about the future on a regular basis. And I live in Chicago. It's a fantastic city. I recommend any and all of you to visit, but it's also that flyover city between New York and San Francisco. So I speak to, and my fellow panelists engage with people every day who really aren't thinking as far out about the future, for whom self-driving cars are a revelation. And to give you a tangible example, I work with a large global insurer, and their leadership team is concerned and interested in things like AI. They're experimenting, they're making plans, and one of those plans, I'm not speaking out of school, is to eliminate perhaps 1,000 actuaries over the next few years because they need to remain competitive, and AI eventually will do actuarial work far better than those very well-paid white-collar workers. And one of the internal discussions, to their credit, is how do we make this transition? How do we effectively bring people along and do it in a respectable, honest way, but also a way that serves our customers better and our share owners? So we're thinking about the future, and Brad, Alexander, and Rob are engaging with corporations, their own, as well as their clients, to try and figure out how to take digital technology, digital behavior, digital culture, infuse it into companies and make them more successful, more effective in this digital age. So what I'd like to do, rather than going through any sort of complicated introduction, is allow the panelists to introduce themselves briefly. I've asked them to share what is your particular role with respect to digital transformation. So Brad, why don't you start?
Sure. I'm Brad Garfield from Wirecard North America. My role is really at that intersection that you described of solutions engineering with our clients to help them understand how they can transform their business-to-consumer payment process to be more than just a payment, how they can leverage innovations around mobile wallets, host card emulation, et cetera, to provide a better, more engaged experience around the payments they're making to their consumers.
Great. Great. Thanks. Alexander, at Lufthansa.
Yeah, so I'm in charge of marketing, and one of the ways in which we think of ourselves is that we're the custodians of the organizing principle behind digital innovation. And the thing that most moves us and that most motivates us is most succinctly put by a quote that Evan Spiegel had a couple of years ago, which was, innovation starts with empathy. So we're the ones that are trying to make sure that whenever we do think about anything that we want to move forward, we really start with human insights, and we really try to figure out what are some of the contextual needs, whether latent or manifest, that we can identify, that we can start addressing through smaller or larger innovations across a whole range of different touch points that we have.
And actually, Alexander, before we move on, Rob, you and I during prep were talking about this notion of empathy, and you actually brought it up. You gave an example of, and I'm going to butcher this, unfortunately, but Heimweh, is this correct, the German word, homesickness, something like that?
Yeah.
So how does homesickness relate to digital?
So one of the things we do, we have two kind of areas in which we're trying to innovate as much as possible. Our core as a brand is enriching travel experiences. We want to make sure that every journey that somebody goes on is as enriching as possible. And that means that we're trying to inspire people to travel better, for the lack of a better word, in a paternalistic sense. But we also want to eradicate as many friction points across the entire journey as we can. And so when it comes to inspiration, we hit on this insight that there is so much going on in the digital world that is so fast and so fleeting and so overbearing. There's a need for people to kind of retrench and find deeper meaning. And travel can be one of those things that can be quite transformative. And we hit upon this notion of people can be homesick for not necessarily just a place, but for a feeling or for a situation. And how do we kind of like get people into a mindset where they become more appreciative, perhaps, of some of the bigger opportunities that travel affords them. And this is a platform that is going into its third round that's just doing fantastically well from a storytelling perspective.
Great. So we'll come back to that. Rob, at Lithium.
Yeah, so we provide software that helps the world's largest brands build awesome digital customer experiences for their end consumers. So that's everybody from Microsoft, Google, HP, GoDaddy, T-Mobile, lots of airlines, a number of other players, and our particular role is to really take all of these initiatives, like the one just mentioned around empathy, and really help design a software system that allows you to engage in truly authentic ways with your end consumer. And once brands start to do that, it really starts to change their business.
Great. So, Rob, I want you to get us started on a scintillating, horrible note. So pick a challenge. One of the things that Lithium does with clients is help to mitigate challenges or disaster relief sort of for corporates. Give us a fantastically torrid example of mitigating after a crisis. And what did you learn from it?
Yeah, so let me start with a really positive story, and then I'll give
All right, you took media training, didn't you?
No,
Okay, yeah.
it's one that's more interesting. So obviously here everybody watches the Super Bowl, even if they don't like football in the United States, they just like the commercials. So it's very interesting, during the Super Bowl this year in particular, you saw the use of social by brands like T-Mobile in using social in a way that really transformed the whole concept of what the brand represented. Instead of talking about different plans and why we wanted you to switch for cost or economic reasons, it was John Ledger's voice coming through and building a personal relationship with everybody that he was engaging with. You got to know a lot more about a CEO of such a big company like that. And it led to an incredible uptick in new subscribers to the detriment of their competitors. But it was all about the responsiveness, the conversational analytics that they used, the way that John turned that into a core brand promise. As I mentioned, we do serve a lot of airlines. We see a lot of challenges in the cable industry with outages. We see challenges with companies like StubHub and others when people show up and they don't get their tickets. And a lot of those disasters are really about the brand not being there when the consumer needs them. And there's this expectation today that it's a two-way conversation. We talked a lot about the complex relationship that people have with truth today and what's really true. For a brand, you have to show up to fulfill your brand promise. You have to be there to engage. You have to have that conversation. You have to bring the insights that people expect you to have. So most of the crises that we experience are when volume goes way up because people or brands are not fulfilling that obligation.
Great. So hopefully we'll come back to an example of something that worked in a little bit. But speaking of what works, a question for the whole panel, for each of you. When digital transformation at a corporation is working well, what does it look like? How do you know, hey, I think we're on the right track?
I would say I think one tell is when the entire customer journey has been optimized and where there's not a break. I think one of the common pitfalls that you'll see is someone maybe updates a front end, has a responsive design site, a really cool app, but then it's integrated with an old back end. And so someone might have a great upfront user experience and then they're waiting several days on the back end for something to happen, waiting for a payment, as the case may be.
Right, and I remember, I'm old enough to remember when receiving a response within 24 hours was pretty darn good. Mm-hmm. Now it's 24 seconds. So what are you seeing, Alexander, at Lufthansa?
So, the challenge that we had, being, a legacy organization, we had about 85 databases that could contain a piece of information on you across the entire journey. Right. So we had to do a vast exercise in cartography to first and foremost figure out what is all of that information, how can it be pertinent, and how can we assemble it in such a way that it can become an added value kind of initiative for you as a customer. So we had to make a substantial invest for about 2 years just to get the foundation right. And I think the thing that tests the organizations perhaps more than most is the fact that you have to be patient. The expectation is that digital is going to be quick and everything's going to be great and it's going to kind of like be a binary switch from an old world to a new world. And what we're finding is that we just need to be really, really patient and just kind of like see it through and continue making the right kind of investments. And then piece by piece, we're starting to find instantiations where customers are really finding a benefit from that, but it's kind of a slow ramp and it's just now for us taking on a lot of speed.
But how do you balance things move fast, and we hear this every day, and new entrants enter markets. how do you balance the patience required and the long-term commitment with the requirement to iterate fast and try stuff and see what works?
I think there's even a sub kind of like conflict that's underneath that, which is the fact that, when we try to think about human centricity, we're the ones that are the custodians of also of the joy of use of the brand. We want to make sure that people just have a smooth, kind of like delightful brand experience. Our sales colleagues obviously are more interested in making sure that we have quick monetization opportunities, and balancing those two out and making sure that we build things in such a way that customers really feel that they can trust us with their information, with their actions, is something that we have to kind of fight over every single day. And the airline industry not being one that creates massive kind of margins, it's an even more tense conversation at times. And I think you just really need to make sure that you find your bearings and you just stick to your story at that point in time.
Yeah, so Rob, Alexander's comment relates to your comment about maintaining trust. So we're businesses, so we have to figure out how to monetize, but we also have to figure out how to instill the joy of the brand and generate trust. How do you square that circle? How do you make those both work?
Yeah, that is a great point. It's a conflict we see all the time. I'll give you two examples. Barclaycard's one of the bigger card issuers, white label card issuer. They used an online community in their travel business and also for their Ring Central card to actually go out to consumers and have them co-develop a card with them, including all the terms and conditions of payment. They exposed the full P&L to all their consumers, saying, here's what it takes for us to be profitable. You help us choose which way you want this to go. And so that was an instance of where they erred on the side of absolute transparency, complete exposure of their business objectives. There were many inside the company who were really worried about that. Boy, is that going to go against our objective to, be able to raise prices? And when they actually went to raise prices, they just told people, hey, we showed you the P&L. We need to raise prices to continue to be a good service provider to you. So that was a great example. YouTube, in their new creator community, has actually found ways to have conversations about this entire new economy they developed, right? There was no such thing 10 years ago as a YouTube celebrity and the idea that people created businesses rooted in their YouTube distribution.
Right.
The creator community really helps customers perfect that art. What are the skills that I need to build to be effective in this new medium? And so that's an example of where this help and onboarding and really getting customers comfortable with the brand and the brand promise does lead to the economic outcome. There are many examples where, and we just did a study on this across 70 different brands. Everybody's saying, oh, digital's passé, everybody gets it. It's actually not true. Most people do not get it at all. In fact,
but part of the issue, Rob, is many people that don't get it think they get it.
Exactly.
And not too many who don't get it don't realize that they don't get it because they don't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, I don't know how to say that in German.
And a stat to back that up is that 98%, these are the top brands across top 70 industries, still do only broadcast. They only advertise.
What percentage?
98%.
98%
still are in broadcast mode. They're not listening. They're not engaging. They're not developing conversation. They're not thinking tone of voice. They're not thinking, where this is going to go. That this isn't me sending you a message and getting you to buy something. It's about me receiving input and designing a product around what you want. So, I mean, that tension we see all the time. And frankly, on the coast, we think we've moved so far, but in the rest of the U.S. and I think across the world, except in major digitally native cities, it's still not happening.
Alexander and Brad, within your organizations or with your clients, partner airlines, for instance, how are you seeing this tension? How are you seeing this evolution play out, this digital evolution?
One example I would give is a large portfolio of our business in North America are incentive payments. So if anyone has ever gotten a rebate, for example, you buy a consumer electronic device, fill out a form, mail it in, and get a check in the mail. Customers and our clients have, I think, not known that they were missing out on an opportunity with those payments to have it be more than just a payment, just the fulfillment of a check to someone, and are starting to realize that when you're paying someone a $100 rebate, instead of just sending them a check, they have an opportunity to not only electronify that experience, create a great piece of your customer journey and extend that beyond the initial purchase, but then to try to direct that spend back to your own products and accessories. And it seems kind of intuitive, but trying to direct that spend back in a meaningful way has a huge potential financial upside to clients when historically they've just been looking at the cost of delivering the payment and missing out on the opportunity to try to direct a large percentage of those funds back to themselves.
Great. Alexander?
I think we're observing a little bit of a paradox in a way, and the digital conversation has taken on kind of a connotation that everything has to be kind of like a pixel-led delivery. Everybody thinks that
Pixel-led?
Like it needs to be kind of like something that happens on a device.
I see.
Right? What we're finding, which is really, really important, is that we are such a large service organization, so we have more than 20,000 flight attendants, and ground staff. What we need to make sure is that we actually get them enabled to have the same quality of information available to them as is available to all of our customers through whatever system they're looking into something. And that is actually still a bottleneck that we haven't figured out. So we're now deploying a lot of digital devices to all of our staff because they're ahead of us in a lot of cases at this point in time. And that kind of like makes it tricky, obviously, to resolve, conflicts that might occur, or just even to be able to pick up a sentiment of a customer as he approaches you. So
Or to figure out when it's the right time to yank somebody off a flight, for instance.
That seems to be an American thing to do.
No, by the way, a quick plug. Lufthansa, you guys do a fabulous job. I fly you all the time across the Atlantic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, sorry, I cut you off.
No, but I think it is. That is one of the things that we're investing in a lot now because we're realizing that is actually something that if we want to empower our employees, they will be able to provide better service, right? And so the whole experience will become significantly improved. But it was something that was almost a little bit of a blind spot in the past, and we're now really accelerating that.
So, what is something that you've seen? It's a question for anyone. That wow, you were so surprised and impressed, and I didn't see that coming, and here's what we learned from it. Or, man, that really didn't work. I thought it was going to work, but it was a disaster, and here's what we learned from it. So take your pick.
I'd give two examples, actually, that are from our own business that have really surprised me. So obviously, one of the whys around digitization and digital transformation is potential lowering of servicing cost and moving to a self-service model. So we believe that to be true, but in a program that we have launched with Samsung Pay, where they're providing an incentive directly into the Samsung Pay app, so an automatic provisioning of a card right into the app, no physical card at all. They also have an integrated balance and transaction history within the app. So when you get a physical card, the first thing the bank asks you to do is call a number on the front to activate it. So you're creating this experience of kind of a manual servicing. With the Samsung Pay program, you're only in the app. That's the entire point of contact. And as a result, if on a normal incentive program we see one call for every payment that we make, with this program we're seeing about 0.1 calls. So it's a fraction of the amount of customer service in a very
So your support costs
way.
plummet if you do this right.
Completely plummets. But not only does that help us as the issuer, but it also, to me, is reflective of a much better customer experience. If someone doesn't have to call an IVR, they're going to have a better experience. And that was surprising that it was that dramatic. And then the other example was with a cruise line that we do a payroll program for, where they used to pay everyone in cash. They did about $1 billion in cash on board ships every year to pay payroll to the crew. Today, they only have about $100,000 in cash on the ships. But the thing that really surprised me was that by digitizing the payment and paying them electronically, their number one spend category is now Amazon. And so on board these ships, every day they're having pallets of Amazon boxes delivered to the crew. And that's their number one spend category.
So we understand, the crew is ordering stuff and Amazon's dropping it off at the port.
Yeah, they're getting it delivered out to the ships.
Really?
So it's completely moving the payroll from cash to an electronic payment onto a card. Opened up a whole new area of spend for these crew members and has transformed life on board the ship in the form of massive pallets of cardboard boxes being delivered every day.
Sounds exciting. Great.
There's
Alexander. Oh, yeah, Rob.
There's one disaster. I haven't heard talked about yet this morning, but it's interesting that shows that there's no relationship between the potential you have a disaster and what your digital sophistication is as a company. So Uber, as an example, to me is on the cutting edge of technology sophistication, but the whole reaction to the taxi cab strike and the attempt to tweet out, well, we've eliminated surge pricing, which then caused people to create the hashtag delete Uber, only to find out that because Uber had never experienced mass deletions of its app, you actually couldn't delete the app. And so that was an example of just walking right into something without thinking about what's going to happen on the human side of this. And if we have a call to action to somebody that we think is going to drive our business, what happens if it backfires? How do we respond to that? Now, we don't provide technology to help Uber. We work with our competitor. But that was an example to me of if you'd thought that through a couple steps out, you would have gone all the way through to what's going to be the experience if it doesn't go well of deleting the app, and how am I actually not going to make it look like I'm trying to make that more difficult. An example of something that's gone really well, I think, is when you think about today, and I think this customer service example is a great one, when you think about today, all the opportunities that brands are providing in the application itself to get customer service. And that's the big trend now, is I don't want to go to a site, I want it to be in-app. I want to know that I can have the seamless experience. One of the things that Samsung is now building out today in their phone is in the Samsung Plus app, you will actually have the ability to see what everybody else is experiencing about how to download new software onto their new phone. So it's, again, just finding that convenient touch point where people are and where they're ready to discover new things about your product that I think is really going to transform use and enjoyment in a huge way.
Right.
And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that goes for them.
So, Alexander.
I think building on that point, I think one of the things that we need to really balance out is we have so many more touch points now. And the natural inclination for any marketeer is to try to have as much information provided to people at every one of those touch points, when really the opportunity is to extrapolate much, much better data knowledge from those touch points and perhaps actually have fewer communications with customers, but have them be more contextually relevant, right? And I think that is still something that we, I don't think, have mastered. I think we have a better cognition of the fact that this is something that we need to work on. But initially it was just, we had an app that would notify you every time you walked by one of our lounges, and I travel a lot. And so I would get pinged like 5 times a day. And at some point it just wasn't pleasant anymore, right? And so we need to kind of like scale back and kind of like look at it holistically again and make sure that if we have already pinged somebody twice in a day, perhaps that's good enough for the day, right? And that is knowledge that we're still developing. I think one of the positive examples of things that we've done from a digital perspective is we did this experiment here at JFK where at the gate, if you had purchased an economy ticket, we would actually give you a 3D immersive experience of what premium economy would look like. And it was just
It sounds like that Seinfeld episode where Jerry's up front and Elaine's in the back.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And that was our inspiration. But it turned out that was just the exact right moment. If we had talked to somebody about that like 2 days before the flight, I don't think that they would have envisioned exactly what the experience would have been like concretely enough to where the trigger would have been successful. But at that moment, when you're starting to kind of like think about what are the next 8 hours going to be like, that was just the perfect stimulus to really, really increase sales for us. And so we're finding that there are literally an infinite number of these like micro opportunities that we can address that have micro needs behind them.
Mm-hmm. Well, so this is related to Brad's comments about the customer journey, and it's a very creative example that wouldn't be obvious in just simply improving your existing processes. But so we're here 5 years from now. What are we talking about? 5 years from now at DLD in Munich, Tel Aviv, New York, wherever, what are we talking about? Anybody? Brad?
I think on the payments front, I think one thing I would expect to see is with the growth of real-time payments, both in the form of debit and credit, how that can transform commerce from today a lot of transactions being card-based to maybe more real-time debit credits from buyers and sellers around the world. Directly to an account-based solution.
Great. Alexander?
I think from a slightly self-serving airline perspective, we're hopeful that the conversation will be around the notion that we're part of the good guys within globalization, because I think it's really meaningful to still transport people and still have physical confrontations with a place or physical meetings with people in order to, I think, as societies function better. I think one of the piece of research that has struck me over the last few weeks is the fact that they see a decline in empathy across kind of like all generations as a result of all the digital platforms on which we're kind of operating. Because WhatsApp is different from sitting down with somebody. I can put down that conversation irrespective of the acuteness of the other person's need. If I'm not in the mood to converse at that moment in time, I'll just put it to the side. And I think to sit down with another person and to fully kind of dedicate yourself to that situation and to really kind of like be present is going to be an increasingly important thing, I think, in order to keep us somewhat on the same level as societies.
Great. Rob?
I would say my one assumption is that over the next 2 years, the cost of the augmented reality device will go down, so it'll be accessible to everybody. And assuming that happens, I think what we'll be talking about is how AI-driven bot experiences connect with human experiences in that medium. So people are going to have more and more upsell opportunities that are going to be immersive, in reality. And if that's the case, you're going to want to ask some questions that 80% of the customers ask, and you're going to have others that are very specific to you. How does a brand do that in a way that invokes the right emotion so they get you to buy the premium economy seat? I think that's the intersection of three things that I see going on today. Chatbots, AI, we're all seeing that experimented everywhere to various levels of success. A brand's recognition of when is a human required versus a machine, and how do you get that right? And then this new medium of everything's a 3D immersive experience that'll be readily available to anyone. In the same way today they have laptops or iPads available, they'll have the devices available, and that's how you'll experience product.
Right. Well, the empathy topic is of keen interest. I think we should all follow that very closely over the rest of our lives. My good colleague at Kellogg, Moran Cerf, is a neuroscientist. Many of you know Moran. We talk about these issues a lot, and one of the issues that we've totally agreed on is people seem to have this sense that empathy will be a cuddly teddy bear we can hold on to as humans. Oh, this makes us human, whereas those stupid computers will never have empathy. Well, that's ridiculous. Because now, will they have it internally in their circuitry? Okay, that's a philosophical conversation. From a pragmatic perspective, computers will actually be better at empathy because they'll be better at determining when you're lying to me to try and pull my heartstrings. It'll get millions of examples to pull from to actually become better at employing empathy, when to use it and when not to use it. Well, this has been great. I always learn a lot from people like you who are in the middle of, in the arena, as Roosevelt said. Brad, you kept coming back to customer journey, and I really think it is about that. It's about our human journey, not just with brands, but with each other. Rob, the notion of the brand not being there, trust, authenticity, and what does authenticity mean in a world of increasing transparency, something I might refer to as hyper-transparency, really, because we're even seeing things like fake news that, are they even really there? So how do we generate and maintain a sense of trust and authenticity when bots are on the other end of the mobile phone, or even if it's a phone? And then Alexander, I love the words you use many times, joy of a brand, deeper meaning, the deeper meaning that we experience from flying or from engaging with a brand or with each other. And this challenge of perhaps the decline in empathy. You mentioned a paradox, and it seems as though the more that we automate, the more quickly and responsive our capabilities become, the more we serve an individual human being the way hopefully they want to be served, the higher the expectations for the human experience. So in a sense, there is a paradox there. And I'll conclude with a quick observation. I'm not one that I see and understand the challenge of saying that these virtual experiences will pull us apart from each other and isolate us. Maybe, as Hillary Putnam said, we'll become a brain in a vat. I don't actually think that's what's going to happen, and history suggests it's not. We'll have a wider variety of experiences and a wider variety of ways to engage. And being social animals, we will compel ourselves to engage with each other and with AI systems and, of course, cybernetic hybrids. And here's a simple example. When the phone first launched, many people were concerned that people would sit at home by themselves on the phone, and it was the end of the face-to-face meeting. Thanks be to God, I don't see that coming, and thanks be to our panel.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot.